No one came to the alien girl's birthday for 7 years, until a man arrived with a cake. Sorry, I'm late. Lysara Quay looked calm from a distance. Up close, it felt controlled. The coastal turbines turned in steady rhythm above the promenade, their low hum layered under the city's soft public music. Pale lights traced the stonewalks in clean lines, bright enough to guide people and dim enough to keep the mood flat. Mist nozzles along the edges released a fine spray that left a mineral taste on the lips and kept dust from settling. The violet sea below moved in slow swells, but even that view felt curated, framed by railings and sightline markers that kept crowds flowing without stopping too long. Marin Holt walked where the lights grew thinner. He wore a matte storm coat with a stiff collar, utility pockets flat against the fabric, and heavy-soled boots meant for wet stone. Rain had darkened his shoulders and sleeves. His hands were weather-worn from work that demanded climbing, measuring, bracing, and signing off on structures other people preferred not to think about. He kept his pace steady, not rushed, not slow. The kind of steady that came from discipline, not confidence. He felt irritated. His jaw tightened as he glanced at the stamped folder tucked under his left arm, then at the wind-lined corridor ahead. His assignment was simple on paper. Check an old service house beyond the maintained district. Confirm weather was safe enough to leave standing for another quarter cycle. File the report. Close the binder. Move on. He had done hundreds like it. This one wouldn't leave him alone. 2 weeks earlier, a supervisor had dropped a stack of paper maintenance binders on his desk with a look that meant no questions. The binders smelled like salt and old glue. Most inspectors hated paper because it slowed them down. Marin didn't hate it. Paper kept fingerprints. It kept dates. It kept the shape of a person's handwriting. He had been flipping through turbine service logs when a folded note slipped out from behind a rust-stained checklist. The paper had been folded so many times the creases had turned pale and stiff. The handwriting was careful and tired, like someone forcing their hand to stay neat. A date, a child's name, Kessarin, a short sentence underneath that hit him harder than any accident report. If anyone ever finds this, today is her birthday. Please don't let her wait alone. Marin had stared at the page until his eyes burned. He'd felt something ugly under his ribs. Not sadness, anger mixed with shame. He knew the system well enough to understand how a child could become not a priority without anyone ever touching her. A file left unassigned. A structure left temporarily standing. A person left in the space between departments. He had put the note back inside the binder, then taken it out again, then made a decision that changed his route for the next week. He requested the inspection personally. No one argued. No one cared enough to stop him. Now he stood at the edge of the maintained district where the stonewalks lost their polish and the air tasted more metallic after rain. The wind-lined corridor cut between service pylons and old conduit runs. Here, the city's scent filters thinned. You could smell wet saltwood, exposed metal, kelp runoff from the lower farms, and damp grit. The service house sat wedged into that corridor like a leftover job no one finished. Saltwood beams, pressure-treated panels, patchwork windows made from mismatched translucent plates. The roof braces vibrated in gusts and made a low singing hum that deepened whenever the wind shifted sideways. The door hung slightly off square and always needed to be lifted before it would open. Marin felt cautious. His shoulders stayed loose, but ready as he approached, eyes scanning the seams, the foundation line, the roof edge. Habit. If the structure failed, it wouldn't care whether he meant well. He stopped at the door and listened. No movement inside. No footsteps. No voices. Only the roof hum and the distant, regulated music from the city behind him. He raised his fist and knocked once, controlled. Not a soft tap. Not a demand. A clear knock that could be heard without sounding like an order. He waited. A long pause. Then a faint shift. Fabric brushing wood. A small breath. The door lifted and cracked open. A child's face appeared in the gap. She was small for 7. Green skin with a soft, tired pallor beneath it. Long red hair, untrimmed, hanging in a thick curtain down her back and spilling forward over one shoulder like she used it as cover. Her eyes were wide and bright, but the focus was sharp, too sharp for her age, like she measured adults for danger before she measured them for kindness. She kept her body behind the door, one hand gripping the edge, the other hand ready to shove it closed. Marin lowered into a squat immediately, bringing himself down to her level. He set the small cake box on the table just inside the doorway, without stepping fully into the room yet. The box was plain cardboard, tied with twine. The lid didn't sit perfectly flat because it was homemade, packed tight, and slightly softened by rain. He felt nervous. His throat tightened as he kept his hands visible and his voice low. He knew what his height and size could do to a child's body, even without intent. He forced himself to slow down. "Hey," he said, simple, like this was a normal doorstep. He took one control breath. "I'm Marin. I work for Civic Restoration." The girl didn't blink. Her gaze flicked to the box, then to his face, then back to the box. He felt the urge to explain too much. His mouth opened, then he stopped himself. Kids like this didn't trust speeches. They trusted what you did with your hands and how fast you moved. He let the silence hang for a beat, then said the only line that mattered. "Sorry I'm late." The girl's lips parted slightly. Her throat worked like she swallowed something hard. Her fingers tightened in her hair, ends until the strands pulled. "How do you know my door?" she whispered. The words came out thin, suspicious, almost angry. Marin nodded once, accepting the edge in her tone without taking it personally. "Because I read something I wasn't supposed to ignore." He reached into his storm coat and pulled out the folded note, holding it where she could see it without forcing it into her space. The girl's eyes locked on the handwriting. Her body went very still. Marin watched her face carefully. Recognition hit her like a physical thing. "That's..." Her voice caught. She tried again, quieter. "That my mom's." Marin didn't move. He didn't take advantage of the opening. He just held the paper steady. "I found it in an old maintenance binder," he said. "Paper logs. Not tracked. Not scanned. Someone hid it." The girl stared at the page as if it might burn. "She's not here." Marin answered with the truth he had. "I don't know where she is." The girl's eyes flicked up sharp. She tested him. "Then why are you here?" Marin felt determined. His fingers pressed lightly against the paper edge to keep them from shaking. "Because you are." He glanced past her shoulder. Not intrusive, just enough to confirm what he already feared. The interior was bare. A low table with one uneven leg. A thin blanket folded tight. A single chair pushed straight like it had been waiting for someone. A small crate near the door with scuff marks from being used as a step. No toys. No spare bedding. No signs of an adult living there. He swallowed, then kept his voice calm. "Can I come in for a minute? I'll sit on the floor. I won't touch anything." The girl hesitated. Her eyes darted to the corridor behind him, then back to the box. Hunger and fear fought in her face. She nodded once, small and sharp, like she hated herself for wanting to say yes. Marin stepped inside slowly and stopped near the wall, giving her space. He set his back against the panel and sat on the floor, knees bent, boots planted, hands resting open on his thighs. The girl stayed by the door, still half behind it. She didn't close it fully. She kept it in a position where she could slam it if she needed to. Marin kept his gaze low, not fixed on her face. He knew staring felt like pressure. "Your name is Kessa," he said. She flinched at hearing it out loud. "Don't say it loud." Marin nodded. "Okay, Kessa." She exhaled sharply, annoyed. "That's still loud." He adjusted. "Okay, sorry." That tiny correction, immediate and simple, changed her posture by a fraction. Not trust, less resistance. Marin tapped the cake box lightly with 2 fingers, then pulled his hand away. "I brought food. You don't have to share. You don't have to thank me. It stays here whether you eat it or not." Kessa stared at the box. "What is it?" "Cake," Marin said, "but not the fancy sweet kind. It's roast crumb base with pepper glaze and a thin sweet layer. Meat-based." The cook called it a festival cake. Kessa's stomach betrayed her. Marin saw it in the way her throat tightened and her mouth watered for a second. She looked away fast, angry. Marin didn't smile at that. He didn't tease. He just waited. Kessa spoke again, quieter. "People don't come here." Marin's gaze flicked to the chair, then back to the floor. "I know." Kessa's fingers twisted harder in her hair. They also don't knock. Marin felt anger again, but he kept it out of his voice. Someone should have. Kessa stared at him like she didn't know what to do with that sentence. Her eyes went wet, and she blinked fast, furious at herself. Marin shifted slightly, slow. "I'm not a cop," he said. "I'm not here to take you anywhere tonight." Kessa's head snapped up. "You can take people." Marin didn't deny it. He respected the fear. Sometimes the city moves kids around like paperwork. "That's why I didn't bring anyone. That's why I'm talking to you first." Kessa's voice dropped to a whisper. "Why?" Marin chose the cleanest truth. "Because you deserve choice." The roof hummed louder with a gust, and the patched window plates rattled softly. Kessa's eyes flicked to the ceiling, then back to Marin, then to the box again. She didn't open it yet. She fought herself for another long moment, then inched forward, keeping distance, and placed her fingertips on the twine as if testing whether it would bite. Marin stayed still. His hands didn't move. Kessa untied the twine with quick, practiced motions. The lid lifted. Warm air escaped, carrying the scent of roasted meat and pepper fat, with a faint sweetness that made the smell feel like an event instead of survival. Kessa inhaled once and froze, eyes wide, overwhelmed by the scent alone. Her stomach tightened visibly. She swallowed hard. Marin watched her and felt protective in a way that made his chest ache. He kept his face neutral because pity could feel like a threat too. Kessa pinched a small piece off the top layer with her fingertips and put it in her mouth. She chewed slowly at first. Her eyes closed for a second without permission, then snapped open again as if she'd made a mistake. She swallowed. Her throat moved hard. She made a small sound she couldn't stop, a quiet broken breath, and she covered it by coughing once. Marin didn't react. Kessa ate another bite, larger, then another, faster now, and she sat down on the floor beside the table because her knees suddenly felt weak. She kept the box close, angled away from the door as if someone might take it. Marin waited until she had swallowed a few times, then spoke softly. "You don't have to rush. It's yours." Kessa didn't look up. "Food disappears." Marin nodded once. "Not tonight." Kessa finally lifted her eyes to his face. They were sharp again, but the fear underneath them was clearer now. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" she asked, and she tried to make it sound like a warning. Marin answered without hesitation. "Yes." Kessa's mouth tightened. "Why?" Marin leaned his head back against the wall. His voice stayed calm, firm, adult. "Because I read the note, and I'm not letting it turn into a sad piece of paper in a binder." Kessa stared at him for a long time. Then she looked down again and ate. Marin stood slowly after a while, making sure she saw every movement before it happened. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small folded card. He set it on the table, far from the cake box. "This is my work contact," he said. "Not emergency. Just my office line. If someone knocks and it's not me, you don't open. You slide this card under the door and you yell my name. Loud." Kessa looked at the card but didn't touch it. Marin moved to the door. Also, he added, practical, the latch jams if you slam it. "Lift first." Kessa's eyes flicked up. "You noticed?" Marin nodded. "I noticed structures." He stepped out into the wind corridor, rain mist catching on his coat. He paused once, not turning around fully, just speaking toward the door. "I'll bring a warmer blanket," he said, "and a heater coil, and more meat." Kessa didn't answer. Marin walked away anyway, boots steady on wet stone, folder tucked under his arm, the note still warm in his pocket like it had weight. Inside the service house, Kessa sat on the floor with the cake box between her knees, eating with quick, careful bites, eyes locked on the door, as if she expected the whole thing to be taken back. But the door stayed shut. The roof hummed. The city stayed distant. And for the first time, Kessa's waiting ritual ended with warm food in her mouth and an adult's promise that sounded like a plan instead of a performance. Morning came quietly to the service house. The wind shifted before sunrise, softer than the night gusts, and the roof braces answered with a lower, steadier hum. Pale light filtered through the mismatched window plates, tinting the interior in uneven bands of green and gray. Dust floated slowly in the air, visible only where the light caught it. Kessa woke sitting up. Her eyes opened fast, breath sharp in her chest, hand already reaching for the cake box beside her. The cardboard was still there, the lid still bent at the corner. The smell of roasted meat lingered faintly in the room, mixed with salt wood and damp air. She stayed still for a long moment, listening. No footsteps, no voices, no knock. Her shoulders tightened anyway. Kessa pushed herself to her feet and went to the door, lifting it carefully before pulling it open just enough to look outside. The wind-lined corridor was empty. Moisture clung to the stone. Farther down, the maintained city glowed faintly, already awake in its quiet, regulated way. He wasn't there. She closed the door, slower this time, and leaned her forehead against it for a second before catching herself and stepping back like that kind of weakness might cost her something. The heater coil wasn't there yet. The blanket was still thin. The chair still wobbled if you leaned wrong. She told herself that made sense. Adults always said things. Coming back was harder. Kessa dragged the crate closer to the table and climbed onto it so she could reach the remaining cake. She tore off a piece and ate standing up, chewing carefully, saving the last of it without thinking too hard about why. Her stomach felt full in a way she wasn't used to, warm instead of sharp. A sound cut through the corridor. Boots. Not running, not sneaking. A steady pace, heavy soles against wet stone. Kessa froze, cake halfway to her mouth. Her heart thudded hard enough that she could feel it in her ears. She slid off the crate and back toward the wall, eyes locked on the door. Her hand went to the latch without touching it yet. The boots stopped outside. A knock followed, clear and controlled. One knock, a pause. Kessa's breath shook. She swallowed and forced it steady. She lifted the door. Marin stood there with a pack slung over one shoulder and a folded length of fabric tucked under his arm. His storm coat was unbuttoned today, collar damp, but not dripping. His hair was still dark from mist. He looked tired in a way that came from not sleeping enough, not from fear. "You came," Kessa said before she could stop herself. Marin nodded once. "Told you." Her mouth tightened. She didn't smile. She stepped aside anyway. Marin entered slowly, stopping where he had yesterday, scanning the seams of habit, then setting the pack down with care. He took the folded fabric and shook it once before laying it out on the chair. It was a real blanket, thick, dull gray with a woven edge, the kind that held heat. Kessa stared at it like it might vanish. Marin noticed. "You don't have to use it," he said, "but it works better than the thin one." Kessa crossed her arms. "You said heater." Marin opened the pack and pulled out a compact coil unit, scuffed but clean, with a manual dial and a red indicator bead. "This one doesn't talk to the grid," he said, kneeling to place it near the wall outlet. "No automatic shutoffs. No network pings." Kessa watched his hands closely. "Why?" Marin paused just long enough to choose his words. "Because sometimes systems notice things that don't need attention." Kessa absorbed that silently. He plugged the coil in and turned the dial. The bead glowed red. Warmth began to creep across the floor. Kessa stepped closer without realizing she had. The heat reached her ankles and she flinched, then relaxed, toes curling slightly. Marin straightened and pulled a paper-wrapped bundle from the pack, setting it on the table. "Food," he said. "Sell melon slices. Fresh. And smoked strip meat." Kessa eyed the package. "For today." "For today," Marin agreed. "And tomorrow I'll bring more." She looked up sharply. "You're not staying?" "No," he said honestly. "Not yet." That answer made her jaw tighten, but she nodded like she'd expected it. Marin reached into the inner pocket of his coat and set a thin folder on the table, weighted flat with 2 fingers so it didn't slide toward her. "This is something else," he said. Kessa didn't touch it. "Paper means trouble." "Sometimes," Marin said. "Sometimes it means protection." He opened the folder just enough for her to see the header and the first page, then closed it again. "Temporary guardianship request," he said. "It doesn't move you anywhere. It doesn't change where you sleep. It just puts my name on the line so no one decides you're a loose end." Kessa stared at the folder. Her breathing went shallow. "They'll take me," she said quietly. Marin shook his head once. "Not if I'm standing in the doorway." Kessa's fingers dug into her sleeves. "You don't know them." "I know the process," Marin said. I've signed off on buildings people lived in without anyone ever asking who lived there. I won't do that to you." She watched his face, searching for cracks. "Why me?" Marin felt the weight of that question. He leaned back against the wall, keeping his voice even. "Because your mother wrote a note like she believed someone decent would find it." Kessa's eyes dropped. "She didn't come." Marin didn't argue. "She hid you." "That's different." Kessa looked up fast. "You don't know that." "I know the note wasn't written by someone who stopped caring," Marin said. Silence stretched between them, filled by the soft click of the heater and the roof's low hum. Kessa finally reached for the food bundle and tore the paper open. The smell of smoked meat filled the room. She tore off a strip and ate without ceremony, eyes still on Marin like she expected him to leave mid-bite. Marin waited until she had swallowed. "Do you know where your mother went?" Kessa shrugged. "She stopped sleeping here. Then she stopped coming at night. Then people said she worked near the Brightwater." Marin's posture changed slightly. "The atrium." Kessa nodded. "She said not to look for her. She said I'd get noticed." Marin felt something settle into place. "Did anyone else come here?" Kessa shook her head. "Sometimes footsteps. Nobody knocks." Marin glanced toward the window line, then back to her. "If someone comes again, you don't open the door. You call my name." She frowned. "You won't hear." Marin pulled a small comm patch from his pack and held it up. "You press this. It's short range. It reaches my office and my coat unit. It doesn't call the city." Kessa hesitated, then took it carefully. "It's light. That's the point." She slipped it into the pocket of her tunic without being told. Marin stood and checked the chair again, tightening the brace he'd brought until it stopped wobbling completely. He pressed down once, firm. Solid. Kessa sat in it immediately, testing, then leaned back slowly like she was afraid to trust it. Marin allowed himself a brief nod. He pulled his coat back on and adjusted the strap of his pack. "I'll come back this evening." Kessa's voice came quick. "You said tomorrow." "I said I'd come back," Marin replied. "I didn't say only once a day." That caught her off guard. She looked away, pretending to inspect the heater coil. As Marin moved toward the door, Kessa spoke again, quieter. "If they ask what I am." Marin turned. "You're a resident." She swallowed. "And you?" "I'm the person who noticed," he said. He opened the door, paused, then added, "Eat slow. Heat stays on low. Don't move the coil." Kessa nodded once. Marin stepped out into the corridor and walked away without looking back, trusting the door to close behind him. Inside, Kessa sat in the stable chair with warm air on her legs and real food in her hands. She ate slower this time. The waiting felt different now. Not gone, just interrupted. Marin left the wind-lined corridor and stepped back into the maintained city, and the difference hit him immediately. The air smelled neutral again. Not clean, neutral. The scent filters erased salt, metal, and rain until everything blended into the same soft nothing. Lights adjusted as he walked, brightening a fraction ahead of him, dimming behind. People moved in controlled flows, shoes dry, clothes unmarked, conversations kept low and efficient. He felt wrong in it. His storm coat was still damp at the shoulders, boots still carrying grit from the corridor, and he didn't bother wiping them on the entry strip. Let the sensors log it if they wanted. He headed straight for the Civic Archive wing. Not the public terminals, but the narrow side corridor where old records still lived in physical storage because no one had paid to convert them yet. Marin keyed in, nodded once at a clerk who barely looked up, and disappeared between shelves of binders stacked chest high. He pulled the same maintenance volume he'd seen before. Turbine sublogs, structural annexes, add-on notes nobody read twice. He flipped pages fast now, fingers precise. Dates, signatures, handwriting styles. He stopped. A subcontractor entry from 3 years back. Cleaning and aesthetic upkeep for public atrium sectors near the coastal overlook. The name beside the approval stamp caught his eye. Garen Voss. Marin felt irritation spike. His jaw tightened. Voss wasn't maintenance. He was a developer, a civic sponsor, the kind of man who smiled in public meetings and never touched paperwork unless it benefited him. Marin traced the approval chain backward. Shortcuts, missing counter-signatures, temporary permissions that had never expired because no one bothered to close them. He exhaled slowly. Bright water, Kessa had said. The atrium. Marin closed the binder and slid it back into place. He didn't take copies yet. He needed context first. He needed to see. By the time he reached the atrium sector, the afternoon cycle had shifted. The violet sea beyond the open overlook reflected light upward, tinting the ceiling panels in soft color. The space was wide and deliberately beautiful. Polished stone, shallow water features, filtered floral scents released at timed intervals. People lingered here because it made them feel like the city cared. Marin slowed his pace and let himself blend. He scanned faces, posture, movement. Who stood too still? Who checked exits? Who wore clothing chosen to disappear instead of attract? Then he saw her. She stood near the fountain's edge, holding a tray of sealed drink cups. Her skin was green, deeper than Kessa's, olive-toned under the lights. Long red hair, styled carefully, not for vanity, but control. Waves pinned in place so they wouldn't fall forward, so they wouldn't hide her face. She wore a storm blue wrap skirt with a high slit that allowed long strides without tripping. A fitted halter top beneath, a sheer shawl. Practical enough to work, revealing enough to keep people from asking why she was there. Thin ankle bracelets caught the light when she shifted her weight, drawing the eye away from her hands, which were steady in a way that felt practiced. Her eyes weren't steady. They tracked movement constantly. Guards, staff, exits, reflections in the polished surfaces. Marin felt certainty settle in his chest. He approached slowly, stopping a few steps away, close enough to speak without raising his voice. "Iverin," he said. Her reaction was immediate. Shoulders stiffened, jaw set. She turned her head, just enough to look at him without fully facing him. "I don't know you," she said calmly. Her voice carried well. "Keep walking." Marin didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He held his position. "I know your daughter," he said. Her fingers tightened around the tray. One cup rattled softly against another. "She's 7, Marin added. "She lives in a service house past the wind line corridor." She still lifts the door before pulling it because it sticks. That did it. Ivra's breath caught. Her eyes flicked toward the fountain, then back to him, sharp with warning. "You shouldn't say that here," she said, barely moving her lips. Marin lowered his voice further. "Then let's talk somewhere you're not being watched." She studied his face, looking for leverage, threat, expectation. "Why would I trust you?" Marin felt the weight of that question. He answered with the simplest truth he had. "Because I knocked." Her eyes softened for half a second before hardening again. "That makes you careless." "It makes me human," Marin replied. A shadow fell across them. Garen Voss stepped into the edge of the fountain light, suit immaculate, smile ready. He placed a hand casually on the fountain rim. Posture relaxed, ownership implied. "Ivra," he said warmly. "Everything all right?" Ivra's spine went rigid. Marin saw it, saw how her shoulders locked, as if she'd been trained not to turn. Marin stepped slightly, placing himself between them without touching either. His movement was calm, deliberate. "She's off duty," Marin said. Voss laughed lightly. "She's never off duty." Marin met his gaze. "She is now." Voss's smile tightened. "You can't just remove people from agreements." "I'm not removing her," Marin said. "I'm giving her a choice." Ivra's fingers trembled. She stared at the tray, like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Voss leaned closer to her, voice low. "Don't make this awkward." Marin felt anger flare. He stepped closer, presence solid, unyielding. "She's leaving," Marin said. "With me." The atrium didn't stop. People passed. Music continued. No alarms. No confrontation anyone else wanted to notice. Ivra looked at Marin. Fear and exhaustion colliding in her eyes. "Say no," Voss murmured. "And this goes back to normal." Normal. Ivra's breath shook. She closed her eyes for a brief second, then opened them and looked straight at Marin. "My daughter," she said quietly. "Is she alone?" Marin shook his head once. "Not anymore. That was enough." Ivra set the tray down on the fountain ledge with careful hands. She stepped behind Marin, close enough that the sheer fabric of her shawl brushed his coat sleeve. Voss's smile vanished. "You're making a mistake." Marin didn't look at him. "You made yours first." He guided Ivra away at a steady pace, not running, not hesitating. He knew the service corridors well enough to avoid the obvious paths. They moved through maintenance passages that smelled of damp stone and ozone. Lights dimmer, cameras fewer. Ivora slipped her shoes off without being told. Heels clutched in one hand, bare feet silent on the floor. Her breathing was shallow. Fast. Marin adjusted his pace to match hers. "Breathe," he said quietly. "Slow." They emerged into the wind-lined corridor as the sky darkened toward evening. A coastal squall rolled in, wind sharp with salt. Marin shrugged out of his storm coat and draped it over Ivora's shoulders without asking. She flinched, then pulled it tight. They reached the service house. Marin knocked once. The door opened almost immediately. Kessa stood there, eyes wide. She saw Marin first, relief flickering. Then her gaze dropped to the woman wrapped in his coat. Confusion crossed her face. Then recognition hit like a wave. "Mama," she whispered. Ivora dropped to her knees on the threshold, shoes forgotten, hands shaking as she reached out. "I'm here," she said, voice breaking despite her effort to hold it together. "I'm here." Kessa stood frozen for a second, then lunged forward and wrapped her arms around her mother's neck, gripping hard like she was afraid the moment might tear. Ivora held her tight, forehead pressed to Kessa's hair, breathing uneven. Marin stepped inside and closed the door carefully behind them, lifting it so it didn't jam. Warm air from the heater coil met the cold wind. Kessa didn't let go. For the first time, the service house held more than waiting. The door closed with a dull, familiar scrape as Marin lifted it into place. The sound felt heavier this time, like it marked a line that wouldn't be easy to cross again. Inside the service house, the air was warm from the heater coil, carrying the mixed smells of smoked meat, damp saltwood, and rain that had followed them in on Marin's coat. The roof hummed low above them as the wind pressed against the braces, but the sound no longer felt empty. Ivora was still on her knees. She held Kessa tightly, one arm locked around the girl's back, the other hand cupping the base of her skull. Her fingers trembled as if they hadn't decided yet whether to relax or brace for impact. Her breathing came uneven, sharp inhales followed by forced slow exhales, her body struggling to relearn how to exist without hiding. Kessa clung to her like she was afraid gravity might pull them apart. Her small hands fisted in the fabric of Ivora's halter, knuckles pale. She pressed her face into her mother's neck, breathing her in, checking the smell, the warmth, the reality of her. "You're real," Kessa said quietly, not a question. Ivora swallowed hard. "I'm real." Marin stood a few steps back, near the wall, his storm coat hanging loose on Ivora's shoulders. He kept his posture neutral, weight evenly balanced, eyes moving automatically to the corners of the room, the window seams, the door latch. Habit. Protection without announcement. Ivora finally noticed him watching and lifted her head. Her eyes were red, sharp, exhausted. "You brought her food," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't gratitude either. Just fact. Marin nodded once. "She eats when she can." "I didn't push." Kessa's grip tightened at that, like the word push mattered more than it should have. Ivora eased back slightly, still keeping one arm around her daughter. She studied the room in quick, practiced glances, the heater coil, the thicker blanket folded on the chair, the stabilized legs, the food bundle on the table. "You fix things," she said. "I assessed them," Marin replied. "They needed fixing." Ivora's jaw tightened. No one else bothered. Marin didn't argue. He moved past them and went to the table, unwrapping the remaining smoked strip meat and setting it within reach. The meat was dark, glossy with rendered fat, the surface textured from slow curing. "She should eat again tonight," he said. "Warm food. Protein." Ivora nodded, then looked down at Kessa. "Are you hungry?" Kessa hesitated, eyes flicking to Marin, then back to the food. "A little." Ivora shifted carefully, rising from her knees while keeping Kessa close. Her legs wobbled when she stood. She corrected without comment. She guided Kessa to the table and broke off a piece of meat with her fingers, testing the texture, then handed it to her. Kessa took it and ate slowly, eyes still fixed on her mother's face as if chewing wasn't the point. Ivra leaned one hip against the table and watched her eat, every muscle in her body coiled tight. Marin saw it in the way she kept her shoulders squared, ready to defend, ready to run. "You shouldn't be here," Ivra said quietly to him, eyes never leaving Kessa. "Not with both of us." Marin met her gaze. "I wasn't planning to leave you separated." Ivra's lips pressed thin. "He won't like this." Marin didn't ask who. "He doesn't own the building, or the corridor, or her. He owns influence," Ivra replied. And silence. Marin leaned back against the wall, arms loose at his sides. "Then we don't stay silent." Ivra gave a humorless laugh. "That's easy to say from the inside." Marin felt irritation stir. Not defensive, just focused. "I'll sign my name on worse. This doesn't scare me." She studied him again, slower this time. "You're not law enforcement." "No." "You're not a fixer." "No." "Then why risk it?" Marin answered without raising his voice. "Because she's a child who was forgotten on paper, and because you hid in plain sight long enough for someone like Voss to think you were his." Ivra's shoulders stiffened at the name. Her fingers curled against the table edge. "You said out loud," she said. Marin nodded. "I wanted to." Silence fell, thick but not empty. The heater clicked softly as it cycled. Kessa finished the meat and wiped her fingers on her tunic. She looked up at both of them, eyes serious. "Are you leaving again?" she asked her mother. Ivra's throat tightened. She crouched in front of Kessa, hands resting on her knees. "Not tonight. Tomorrow," Kessa pressed. Ivra hesitated for half a second too long. Marin stepped in, calm and firm. "No one's moving her without talking first." Kessa looked at him. "You said you don't take people." "I don't," Marin said. "I help them choose." Kessa nodded once, accepting that as a rule. Ivra exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders dropping a fraction. She reached up and pulled Marin's stormcoat tighter around herself. "I don't have anything," she said quietly. "No papers. No address they'll accept." Marin pushed off the wall. "You have a name. You have a child. And tonight, you have a roof that hasn't failed inspection." She almost smiled at that. Almost. Marin moved to the window and checked the plates, adjusting one that rattled too much in the wind. He tightened a brace with practiced hands. "I'll stay until the wind dies down," he said. "After that, I'll leave. I'll come back in the morning." Ivra's eyes flicked to the door. "And if he comes?" Marin turned back, expression steady. "He won't knock. And if he doesn't?" Marin didn't hesitate. "Then I'll be the one standing in front of him." Kessa watched this exchange closely, absorbing tone more than words. She reached for her mother's hand and held it, small fingers locking around larger ones. Ivra looked down at her, then back at Marin. Her voice dropped. "I didn't abandon her." "I know," Marin said. "I was keeping her invisible." "So was the city," Marin replied. The wind hit the braces harder, the roof humming deep and loud for a moment before settling again. Kessa yawned suddenly, the adrenaline draining out of her body all at once. Her eyelids drooped. Ivra scooped her up without asking, lifting her with effort she didn't comment on, and carried her to the blanket bed in the corner. She tucked the thicker blanket around Kessa's shoulders, adjusting it carefully, hands gentle but firm. Kessa grabbed her wrist before she could pull away. "Don't go." Ivra leaned down, pressing her forehead to Kessa's. "I'm here." Kessa's eyes closed, her grip loosening slowly. Marin watched from across the room, the heater's warmth reaching his boots, the sound of shared breathing filling the space. For the first time, the service house felt occupied. Not crowded, occupied. The wind eased sometime after midnight. Marin noticed it first in his bones, the pressure shifting, the roof braces settling into a steadier hum instead of the strained vibration that came with hard gusts. The heater coil clicked softly, red bead dimming as the room held its warmth. The service house smelled faintly of saltwood, cooked meat, and rain drying out of fabric. Ivra sat on the floor beside Kessa's blanket bed, back against the wall, knees drawn up. She hadn't slept. Her eyes stayed open, tracking every sound, every creak, every distant vibration from the corridor outside. One hand rested on Kessa's shoulder, fingers splayed protectively through the thick blanket, as if touch itself was a guard. Marin stood near the window, checking the plate he'd tightened earlier. He pressed gently against the frame, listening. Solid. He let his hand drop. You don't have to stay awake, he said quietly. Ivra didn't look at him. If I sleep, I don't hear footsteps. Marin accepted that without argument. He moved to the table and poured a small amount of Rava-Fizz into a chipped cup, the liquid hissing softly. He set it within her reach, not forcing it into her hand. Drink, he said. It'll keep your throat from locking up. She hesitated, then took it, fingers brushing his knuckles for a brief second before pulling back. The contact made her inhale sharply, then steady herself. She drank in small sips. Did she eat enough? Ivra asked. Yes, Marin replied. Slow, like she needed. Ivra nodded once. She always rushes when she thinks it might be taken. Marin leaned back against the wall across from her, lowering himself to sit on the floor. He kept distance, but not too much. Close enough to matter if something happened. She trusts you, he said. Ivra gave a short, humorless breath. She shouldn't. I taught her how to disappear. You taught her how to survive, Marin replied. Her jaw tightened. By leaving, Marin didn't soften his voice. By staying close enough not to lose her. Ivra closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, sharp. You don't know what he said he'd do if I took her with me. I know what people like him threaten, Marin said. I've seen the paperwork that follows. That made her look at him properly. Paperwork. He nodded. He doesn't use force. He uses denial. Housing delays. Work blacklists. Quiet notices that never reach you until everything stops. Ivra's fingers curled into the blanket. He said if I made noise, she'd be classified as unregistered occupancy. Marin felt anger flare, contained but heavy. That classification doesn't hold if someone competent challenges it. And you're competent, she said, testing. I'm stubborn, Marin replied. And my job gives me access. Silence stretched again. The heater clicked. Kessa shifted slightly in her sleep, mumbling something unintelligible, then settled. Ivra's hand tightened reflexively, then relaxed when the child's breathing evened out. Marin watched that moment closely. He planned to guide her through the steps she needed to regain her independence, even if she didn't fully understand them yet. Not by dragging her into a system that had already failed her, but by standing between her and the parts that would try again. I didn't tell her where I was, Ivra said suddenly. When I started working near the atrium. Marin waited. I told myself it was temporary, she continued. 1 cycle. 2. Just until I could get papers clean enough to move her somewhere safer. Her voice dropped. Then Voss noticed I didn't complain. Marin nodded slowly. Compliance reads as consent to people like him. She laughed under her breath. He said I was easy to manage. Marin's expression hardened. He was wrong. Ivra studied him for a long moment. Why do you care this much? Marin didn't rush his answer. Because if I sign off on another structure with a child inside it and walk away again, I won't recognize myself. That landed. Ivra looked down at Kessa, then back at Marin. What happens tomorrow? Marin answered plainly. Tomorrow I bring food again. I bring a second heater coil as backup. I file the guardianship petition quietly, and I start pulling records on Voss that don't rely on rumors. She absorbed that, piece by piece. And me, you stay here, Marin said. You rest. You don't go back to the atrium. And if he comes looking, Marin's gaze stayed steady. He won't come himself. He sends messages. Ivra's shoulders tensed. Messages are worse. Marin nodded. Then we document them. The light outside shifted slightly as the city cycle changed, faint illumination bleeding through the mismatched plates. Dawn was coming, slow and gray. Ivra finally leaned her head back against the wall, exhaustion catching up now that fear had somewhere to sit. Her eyelids fluttered. Marin noticed and stood quietly. He moved to the corner and pulled the thicker blanket off the chair, folding it once before draping it gently over her shoulders, careful not to wake Kessa. Ivra stiffened for half a second, then relaxed into the warmth. Her voice came softer. You didn't have to. Yes, Marin said simply. I did. She looked up at him from under the blanket, eyes tired but focused. If this goes wrong, it won't, Marin interrupted, not harshly but firmly. And if it does, You won't be alone. Ivra studied his face, then nodded once, accepting that as a promise, not comfort. Minutes passed. Her breathing slowed. Eventually, her eyes closed, though her hand stayed anchored on Kessa's shoulder. Marin remained where he was, listening to the house breathe, to the distant hum of turbines far beyond the windline corridor. He didn't sleep. He didn't need to. Outside, Lysara Quay continued its quiet routines, unaware that something it had overlooked was beginning to resist being invisible. Morning light crept into the service house in thin, uneven strips, sliding through the mismatched window plates and landing across the floor in pale bands. The heater coil clicked once and went quiet, the room holding onto the warmth it had built overnight. Outside, the windline corridor sounded calmer, footsteps distant and rare. Marin hadn't slept. He stood near the door, stretching stiffness out of his shoulders with a slow roll, then checked the latch again out of habit. It held. He glanced back toward the corner where Ivra and Kessa slept. Kessa lay curled under the blanket, breathing deep and even, one hand still clutching a fold of her mother's clothing like a tether. Ivra had drifted sideways during the night, her back against the wall, head tilted forward, hair falling loose from its careful style. The storm coat had slipped off one shoulder, exposing the curve of her collarbone and the faint gold freckles scattered across her skin. Marin felt a pull in his chest he didn't name. He moved quietly, careful not to wake the child, and crouched beside Ivra. She stirred as he adjusted the blanket higher on her shoulders. Her eyes opened halfway, unfocused at first, then sharpened when she realized where she was. "You're still here," she said softly. Marin nodded. "Morning." Her throat worked. She shifted, wincing slightly as stiffness caught her muscles. "I fell asleep." "You needed to," he said. Ivra looked past him to Kessa, confirming with her own eyes that the girl was still sleeping. Relief softened her face. Then tension crept back in as she pushed herself upright. "How long?" she asked. "Couple of hours," Marin replied. "Enough." She rubbed her arms, chilled now that she was awake. Marin reached out without thinking, steadying her elbow as she stood. His hand was warm, firm, and he noticed the way her body reacted to the contact. How her breath caught, how she didn't pull away immediately. The moment stretched. Ivra straightened and cleared her throat. "I should make her something." "I've got it," Marin said. He moved to the table, unwrapping the remaining smoked meat and slicing it into smaller pieces with a compact utility blade. The meat tore cleanly, fibers separating with a soft sound. He set water on a heat plate, added dried grain and fat, letting it warm into something filling. Ivra watched him from the wall, arms folded loosely now, posture less defensive than the night before. "You do this a lot," she said. "Feed people," Marin replied. "Yeah, that wasn't what I meant." He glanced at her. "Fix what shouldn't have been broken." She met his eyes. "You're too calm for this." Marin shrugged slightly. Panic wastes time. Kessa stirred then, rolling on her side, eyes blinking open. She looked around, orienting herself, then relaxed when she saw both of them. "You didn't go," she murmured. Ivra crossed the room in 2 steps and knelt, brushing hair out of Kessa's face. "I'm here." Kessa nodded once, satisfied, and closed her eyes again for a few more minutes of sleep. Marin turned the heat plate down and poured the warm mixture into a bowl, the surface steaming faintly. He set it on the table to cool. "I'm going out for an hour," he said quietly to Ivra. "Food run. Backup coil. I'll be quick." Her shoulders tensed immediately. "Alone?" "Yes. And if I won't be followed," Marin cut in, firm but not sharp. "I know how to move in this city." She hesitated, then nodded. "I'll stay inside." He grabbed his coat, then paused at the door, looking back at her. "If anyone knocks, you don't answer. You use the patch." "I know," she said. "You already told her." Marin left without another word. When he returned, the house smelled different. Not just warmed food, but something faintly domestic. Washed fabric drying near the heater, water splashed on the floor and wiped imperfectly. Ivra had cleaned without realizing she was doing it. Kessa sat at the table, eating slowly. Ivra stood nearby, hair retied, but looser now, wearing the storm coat again, sleeves rolled up past her forearms. Marin set the supplies down. No trouble. Ivra exhaled. Good. Kessa finished and slid off the chair. I'm tired again. Ivra scooped her up gently. Nap. She settled Kessa back under the blanket, dimmed the lamp coil, and waited until the child's breathing evened out. Silence filled the room again, thicker this time. Ivra leaned against the table, arms braced behind her, staring at the floor. When I thought she was asleep forever, I kept touching the air where she should have been. Marin stepped closer, slow. You don't have to say more. She looked up at him, eyes bright, vulnerable in a way she hadn't allowed before. I need to feel something solid, she said quietly. Just for a second. Marin didn't hesitate. He closed the distance and rested his hands on her waist, not pulling her in, just anchoring her there. His grip was firm, controlled, warm through the thin fabric. Ivra inhaled sharply, fingers curling into the front of his shirt. She leaned forward, forehead pressing against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was steady, unrushed. Her body trembled once, then settled. Marin felt the weight of her trust in the way she leaned into him. He slid one hand up her back, fingers spreading between her shoulder blades, grounding her there. She tilted her head up slowly, eyes searching his face for permission he didn't need to give. Their kiss was quiet, not desperate, not rushed. Her lips pressed to his, testing, then lingering. Marin responded with restraint, holding back more than he gave, letting the contact speak without overwhelming her. He felt the warmth of her mouth, the faint taste of salt and sleep, the tension easing out of her shoulders as the seconds passed. She pulled back first, breath uneven, forehead still resting against his. That was enough, she said, voice low. Marin nodded. Whenever you say stop. She gave a small, real smile at that. They stayed close for a moment longer, sharing heat, listening to the house settle around them. Outside, the city continued its quiet rhythm, unaware of the small, deliberate connection forming at its edge. For now, that was enough. The afternoon thinned into evening without ceremony. Light shifted behind the patched window plates, turning from pale gray to muted amber. The heater coil hummed steadily, its warmth spreading low across the floor. Outside, the wind-lined corridor carried distant footsteps now and then, but none stopped. No knock came. Marin sat on the floor, near the table, back against the wall, reviewing a thin stack of papers he'd brought back earlier. Not forms that demanded signatures yet, just copies, notes, timelines. His attention stayed sharp, but part of him tracked the room by instinct. The sound of Ivra's breathing, the position of the door, the way the house settled when the temperature changed. Ivra stood near the window, arms folded loosely, watching the city glow beyond the corridor bend. She had changed out of the storm coat into a simple wrap she'd found folded in a crate. Dark fabric-tied at the waist, practical, soft against her skin. Her hair hung loose now, falling over one shoulder, catching the heater's warmth. Kessa slept in the corner, mouth slightly open, one knee drawn up, blanket tucked tight. The nap had gone longer than planned. Ivra spoke without turning. She hasn't slept that deeply in months. Marin looked over. She knows you're still here. Ivra nodded once. So do I. She turned then, slowly, as if the movement itself mattered. Her eyes settled on Marin, studying him with less armor than before. You're going to push this, she said. Not a question. Yes, Marin replied. With Voss. Yes. And the city. Yes. She walked closer, stopping just short of him. They don't like disruption. Marin folded the papers and set them aside. They tolerate it when it's quiet and documented. Ivra's mouth tightened. I've been quiet my whole life. Marin stood, closing the distance carefully. Not anymore. The words landed between them with weight. Ivra's breath caught. She didn't look away. What if they take her anyway? She asked. Not tonight. Later, when things settle. Marin reached out, slow, and rested his hand against her forearm. His grip was firm enough to be felt through fabric, not possessive, anchoring. Then they go through me, he said, and through records they don't like being attached to. She searched his face. You're certain? I'm committed, Marin corrected. That distinction mattered to her. She nodded, a small release passing through her shoulders. Ivra stepped closer, close enough that their bodies almost touched. Her voice dropped. I don't remember the last time someone chose me without asking what it would cost them. Marin didn't answer with words. He lifted his other hand and brushed a loose strand of her hair back behind her ear, fingers grazing her skin briefly. The contact was deliberate, restrained, and it made her inhale sharply. She leaned into his hand before she could stop herself. Marin felt the shift immediately, the way her weight transferred, the way tension gave way to something softer. He slid his hand to her waist again, grounding her there, thumb pressing lightly into the fabric not at her side. Ivra rested her forehead against his chest, eyes closed, breathing slow and uneven. "If I pull away," she said quietly, "it's not because I don't want this." Marin's voice stayed low and steady. "Then I'll wait." She lifted her head and kissed him again. This time it lasted longer. Her mouth moved against his with growing confidence, testing pressure, rhythm. Marin answered without rushing, one hand steady at her waist, the other sliding up her back until it rested between her shoulders, holding her there. He felt her body respond, how she pressed closer, how her fingers tightened in his shirt, how her breathing changed. She broke the kiss abruptly, resting her cheek against his shoulder. "Too much," she said, not distressed, just honest. Marin didn't release her. "Okay." They stayed like that, bodies close, sharing warmth and breath. The house seemed smaller in that moment, not confining, just intimate. A soft sound came from the corner. Kessa shifted in her sleep, then settled again. Ivra stiffened instinctively. Marin felt it and adjusted immediately, easing his hold without stepping away. She didn't wake. Ivra exhaled slowly. "I keep forgetting I don't have to disappear." "You don't," Marin said. She pulled back enough to look at him properly. "If we do this," she said, careful, "it can't be rushed. Not because of her. Because of me." Marin met her gaze. "I'm not here for shortcuts." That answer eased something in her. She nodded once. They moved apart reluctantly. Marin picked up the food pack and set another small portion heating, the smell of meat and grain rising again. Ivra took the cup he offered and drank, watching him over the rim. "You're not what I expected," she said. Marin glanced at her. "What did you expect?" "Someone who wanted to rescue us," she replied. "Someone who'd make decisions for us." Marin stirred the pot. "I'm here to make sure you get to make your own." She watched his hands, capable and calm. "That's harder." "Yes," he agreed. Later, when Kessa woke again, groggy and confused, she found both of them at the table. Marin slid a bowl toward her. Ivra sat close enough that their knees touched. Kessa looked between them, eyes sharp despite sleep. "You're both here," she said. "Yes," Ivra replied. Kessa nodded, accepting the fact like a solved equation, and started eating. As night settled in again, the city's glow dimmed beyond the corridor. Inside the service house, the heater held steady, the door stayed closed, and the three of them occupied the space without hiding. The danger hadn't vanished. It had simply been acknowledged. And for the first time, Ivra felt something close to readiness instead of fear. Night passed without interruption. No knock, no voices in the corridor, no shadow lingering too long outside the patch window plates. The wind rose and fell, the roof answered, and the heater coil held its quiet line of warmth like it had learned the house's shape. Morning arrived muted and gray. Marin woke first, seated where he'd settled near the wall, stiffness running through his back and shoulders. He shifted slowly, testing the space before moving. The house felt occupied in a way it hadn't before. Not crowded, not tense. Anchored. Ivra lay asleep on the floor beside Kessa. One arm curved protectively around the child's back. Her breathing was deep now, even. Her face looked younger in sleep. Tension softened, lips slightly parted. A loose strand of red hair had fallen across Kessa's cheek, and Kessa had curled closer, fingers hooked into it without waking. Marin watched them for a long moment. He felt resolve, heavy and clear. It settled behind his ribs the way structural decisions always did when he knew which path would hold and which would collapse later. He stood quietly and moved to the table. The remaining supplies were modest, but enough. He set water to heat and sliced the last of the smoked meat, the blade whispering through the fibers. The smell spread slowly, warm and grounding. Ivora stirred at the sound. Her eyes opened, alert at first, then softened when she saw Marin. "You're still here," she said, voice low, rough with sleep. "Yes," he replied. "Morning." She sat up carefully, checking Kessa without fully waking her. She didn't move. She felt safe, Marin said. That word landed differently this time. Ivora nodded, then pushed herself to her feet, rolling her shoulders once, as if shaking off the last of the night. "You didn't sleep," she said. "I did enough," Marin replied. She studied him, seeing more than he said. "You stayed on purpose." "Yes." Ivora crossed the room and stood beside him at the table, close enough that her arm brushed his. She didn't move away. "What happens now?" she asked. Marin plated the food and set one bowl aside to cool. Now he stopped surviving hour to hour. She exhaled slowly. "You have a plan?" "I have steps," he said. "First we eat. Then I file the guardianship petition in person today, with you present if you want. Not hidden, documented. I also submit a structural residency certification for this house. Temporary but valid." Ivora's brows drew together. "That puts us on record." "Yes," Marin said. "And that's protection, not exposure. Voss works in shadows. He avoids paper trails that don't favor him." She leaned her hip against the table, absorbing that. "And if he retaliates?" Marin met her eyes. "He already tried." Quietly. "This makes it louder than he likes." Kessa stirred then, rolling on her back, blinking up at the ceiling. She yawned wide, then turned her head and smiled faintly when she saw both of them standing there. "You're cooking again," she said. Marin nodded. "You're eating again." Kessa pushed herself up and shuffled over, blanket dragging behind her like a tail. She climbed onto the chair and waited without being told. Ivora watched that with a tight expression she didn't comment on. They ate together, slowly, no rush. Kessa chewed carefully, pausing between bites. Ivora ate more than she had the night before, shoulders relaxing as warmth settled into her body. Marin ate last, eyes moving between them and the door, habit still present but quieter now. Afterward, Kessa slid off the chair and leaned against her mother's side. "Are we staying?" she asked. Ivora looked at Marin before answering. "Yes," Marin said, steady. "We're staying, and we're fixing what needs fixing instead of running." Kessa nodded, accepting it with the simple certainty only children had. "Okay." She yawned again and wandered back to the corner, curling under the blanket with a contented sigh. Silence returned, different from before. Not watchful, resting. Ivora stood near the window, arms folded loosely, looking out toward the bend where the maintained city began. The glow beyond it felt less distant now. "I don't know how to be normal," she said quietly. Marin stepped up beside her, not touching yet. "Good." She turned, surprised. "Good. I don't want normal," he said. "I want honest. And steady." That made her eyes sting. She looked away, jaw tightening. Marin reached out then, slow, and took her hand. His grip was warm, certain. She didn't resist. "I'm choosing this," he said. "Not as a favor. Not as a rescue." Ivora closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. "I need time." "You have it," Marin replied. "And I'll stay visible while you take it." She stepped closer and rested her forehead against his shoulder, breathing him in. Her hand tightened around his. After a moment, she lifted her head. "There's something we do," she said. "For family. Not legal. Cultural." Marin listened. "When two people decide to stop pretending they're alone," she continued, "we share breath. It's simple, private." She guided his hand to the base of her throat, fingers warm against his skin. "Only if you mean it." Marin didn't hesitate. He leaned in, forehead touching hers. They breathed together, slow, deliberate. One breath, then another, then a third. The room seemed to hold still around them. When they pulled back, something had shifted. Not dramatic, settled. Kessa murmured in her sleep, turning onto her side. Ivor smiled softly. She always talks when she's comfortable. Marin felt a calm spread through him that had nothing to do with victory or relief. just alignment. Later, as lights strengthened outside and the city fully woke, Ivra sat at the table, hands wrapped around a cup of warm water. She went still suddenly, brow creasing. One hand drifted down to her abdomen without thought. Maren noticed immediately. What? She looked up at him, eyes wide, then uncertain. I felt strange since yesterday. Tired. The smells this morning. She stopped, breath catching. Maren's chest tightened. He didn't rush her. Ivra swallowed, then gave a small, stunned smile. I think there might be another child. The words hung in the air. Maren felt awe hit him hard and quiet. He stepped closer, careful, like the moment might break if he moved too fast. You're sure? He said softly. No, she replied honestly. But I feel it. Maren placed his hand gently over hers where it rested, grounding, protective. Then we'll be ready. Her eyes filled. You don't hesitate. No, he said. I commit. From the corner, Kessa shifted, eyes opening halfway. You're talking quiet, she said sleepily. Ivra laughed softly through tears. Go back to sleep. Kessa blinked, then smiled faintly. Don't forget the cake next time. Maren smiled for real this time. I won't. The house hummed around them, warm and held. Outside, Lysara Quay continued its orderly routines. Inside the service house at the edge of attention, a family had finished waiting.